Breaking news on the quarter hour today. Jacqueline Ellen Henderson is an applicant in a court action against ARN. Joining us to discuss is Calum Jaspan, media writer for the SMH, Sydney Morning Herald, and The Age. Hello, Calum.
Nice to be back on the show.
Thanks, mate. It's good to have you back. And thanks for jumping on with this breaking news. So Jackie has demanded that KISS bosses, quote, stop the abusive relationship months before Sandilands and the fight that we all know about. Tell us what you know.
Yeah, so we finally got a look at Jackie O's statement of claim this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. In there, she sort of goes into detail about the services agreement that she had with KISS. She outlines that she was a private contractor, and she goes into quite a lot of detail, in particular about this sort of allegation that KISS or ARN or CBC, whichever body you want to refer to here, had sort of filtered out in both Henderson's case when they went to the ASX last week about that, and also in their defence against Kyle Sandilands, that Jackie O's initial letter via her lawyers back in February after she had gone off air. She alleged that there were this instance and the previous instances that she had complained about that had caused her psychosocial harm. Now, it's been made clear, at least what she's alleging in her statement of claim, that this dates back at least to August last year, after a broadcast in which the two were arguing again over something similar. I was listening back to it today, and it sort of goes into Jackie talking about sort of her experiences through therapy and her experiences in relationships, and Kyle lays into her basically once again, calling it bullshit and this, that, and the next, and calling into question her beliefs in all this kind of thing. And then saying something along the lines of, this is why you'll never end up with anyone because you've got all these ridiculous demands. And in another broadcast, he mentioned she was on her period time, and or that may have been in the same broadcast. I don't quite have it right in front of me, but this sort of goes into her storming off the show and subsequently lodging a complaint with the station manager, Derek Bagwana.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting because what it introduces for the first time, I think, is a more fulsome timeline. So what we know in the public domain is obviously what happened on the air. That's not in dispute because if it's on the air, we've all heard it and got a record of it. What is in dispute, and a comment I saw from ARN says they intend to defend the allegations. So these are just allegations that Jackie's making at the moment. They haven't been tested in court, but soon will be. Is that this was not just a one-off. First of all, it wasn't just a one-off quote-unquote argument, because it was never an argument. It was one person picking on the other. It actually dates back. And just on the timeline, Callum, I thought it was really interesting to go back and have a look. So Jackie says she made complaints to management. In this case, management would have been Derek Bagwana, head of the network, at that time. And those complaints date back to August and September. The ARN up front, the all singing, all dancing up front, was the 29th of October. So at the time of Kyle and Jackie O going on stage and dancing in front of advertisers and saying, we're amazing, these issues were already on foot. She's already made some complaints and she's already made sure that ARN know about it. And in her allegation now that we've heard is that ARN did nothing about it.
Yeah, well, the sort of second part to that August complaint is a month later. There are allegations in there that she had sort of checked back in with Bagwana DB, and he had suggested that. Let me just read you actually the text exchange. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, do it.
On the 10th of September, Henderson sent a message to Bagwana after another broadcast, and she said, "I will not be spoken to the way I was," brackets, particularly off air. And then he responded saying, "Kyle is going to try and call you on air to share good news. He lost weight. He wants to be your friend again," etc. Bit of a strange text, but about 24 hours later, DB checks in with Jackie O, says, just checking in, all okay today. And she responds by saying, yeah, it's fine today, but let's make sure Hamish, that would be ARN chair Hamish McLennan, and Kieran Davis, then CEO of ARN, start to think about how we're going to address this. We're getting a lot of complaints from listeners calling it an abusive relationship, women especially. I can send you some of the examples. And he responds, don't worry, I'm all over that with C and H. Had 2 chats, yes, with them. So this isn't just management. It's executive management, Kieran Davis and Hamish McLennan, who's still the company's chair, and he's up for re-election at the AGM next month.
Right.
So,
Yep.
Yeah, you could. These are the 2 people principally who gave them the contract in 2023. You know, we've all seen the pictures from the 19th floor in North Sydney, the pink floor, the sky rising, the Louis Vuitton suitcase.
Yep.
Yeah, these 2 sort of were the people who were flying the flag and take claim for what was then a celebrated contract. But, you know, obviously, you know, within less than 9 months of the new contract starting, it's already falling apart, and there's complaints happening. And now we don't actually have any sort of understanding of when she says, let's make sure that we're addressing it, or what that actually entailed. And as you said,
what did it mean?
To appear at the upfronts, and by all intents and purposes, they came back in 2026 under the pretense of proceeding with the show. And so when she sent that legal notice on the 26th of February this year, basically informing the company that it was her view and her lawyer's view that they were breaching the Fair Work Act in failing to act and failing to censor or step into that broadcast on the 20th, which was their final broadcast. And their response on the 3rd of March was to terminate that services agreement.
Yeah, and look, and some of the detail in here I think is quite interesting because, and we have to kind of take this from all parties' perspectives because, you know, in any situation like this, there can be a fair bit of, this is what I thought, this is what you thought. Kyle is no doubt going to say, as he has already, that this is the robust nature of the show, is kind of how he's framing it, is that this is what they do. They kind of have these arguments, or what he thinks are arguments. They have disagreements, and the company monetise those arguments, and in fact, to a very handsome sum, wanted them to keep going with that kind of content. But what you sort of start to get the picture of here, or the picture that Jackie is painting anyway through her allegations, is, well, hang on a minute, but let's go back to September. Let's go back to August. I said I wasn't okay with this. I raised it with management. I was told it's good. You know, I'm all over it, was the phrase from the text message from DB with the chair and also the CEO. Okay, fine. Assumingly, Jackie keeps going. But then when we get to the incident on the 20th of February, Jackie kind of throws a few more things in here. She says she was visibly and audibly upset by the conduct, which we all heard and saw. She says that the company did not attempt to intervene and did not otherwise stop Mr. Sandilands engaging in that conduct. Now, what's interesting is if you hear that now as not just a one-off, right? Because on the morning it sounded like, oh gosh, it's all gone to shit really quickly. But if you hear that as not just a one-off, and you know what has been said by Jackie too, or alleged to have been said by Jackie to Derek Bargwanna and others in senior management beforehand, this is just another example of what she's already effectively made a complaint about. So the fact there was no intervention, I think, is very interesting. The other thing I think is quite interesting in here, and I think it's the first time it's been expressed like this, Jackie makes a particular note in her claim where she says when they did the contract, effectively, she was allowed to do the breakfast show without Kyle. That was a key part of the contract. In fact, I'm just going to pull up the actual part of it that says that because I highlighted that. It says that it was an express agreement of the program services provided by Jackie that in a live broadcast program that did not include Mr. Sandilands. So in her mind, she's got a contract which says, I'm doing the show whether or not Kyle's there. I've gone to management and said, I can no longer do the show with him. And as part of her claim, she's also said that effectively ARN have gone and told the world via the ASX statement that she, in her view, she thinks that they've laid the perception she doesn't want to do the breakfast show, which is untrue because she can do the breakfast show without him.
Well, and she also claims that they have basically misled the ASX in their statement, saying that she had been offered the possibility of an alternative show. So I think you've got this really, sort of complex situation here where we've got these two cases. They're obviously, in a sense, competing with each other because they're all about the same thing, but they are separate cases. I mean, Sandilands has positioned this as though it was, he's completely blindsided as to, why this has come about. The indication would have been that, there was no pretext. We now have evidence, or at least going by Henderson's statement of claim, that there was pretext to this. We are currently unaware of any sort of formal communications or warnings that were in place specifically related to Sandilands' conduct towards Henderson. But her allegations here seem to be in contrast to what Sandilands has said, essentially, that this was a one-time or one-off blue. This happens all the time. This is our relationship. And, we're really seeing here just laid out that, she has clearly diverged from what his understanding and what his vision of what their dynamic on the show is. And, listening back to that initial show on the 20th of August, you do sort of have this really interesting dynamic where I think he's sort of maybe pressing her as though this is what he's come to expect of their relationship. And she begins to say, don't attack me. And then she walks off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also, like, there's still a lot of unknowns here. I mean, Kyle might claim, for all we know, that he was unaware of how unhappy she was. He was unaware that she'd gone to management. Maybe. We don't know that. That'll be tested in court.
That may be true, but we've got these messages that are claiming from DB saying that he's saying he wants to be friends again.
Yeah.
So in some sense, maybe he didn't understand the severity of it, but if we're to take this at face value, he must have known that she was at least, affronted by his conduct towards her.
Yeah, and it's a difference, I guess, and we're seeing this sort of narrative play out where these performers believe that they're performing, and therefore that divorces them from the responsibility of being a decent human being. And you kind of hear things where they're saying, well, no, that's just me. That's an act. That's what I'm paid to do. But the reality is, as Jackie's kind of making clear here, is that she is providing services to a company. She is the principal provider of those services. She has a contract which says she doesn't have to do it with Kyle. She went to management to say, Kyle's a problem. I don't want to work with him. Not do breakfast. I want to work with him. And we're yet to find out, I'm sure we will soon, what ARN did as a result of those complaints, because that'll have to form part of their defence, right?
Yeah, for sure. Just how involved they were and just how seriously they took it. And obviously the complication here is that you've got a new CEO as opposed to the initial CEO that those complaints were made towards. And Lauren Joyce has obviously left the company now. We've got a new chief content officer, so it's a completely new team installed. But
yeah,
just a sort of final point, one sort of reflection on all of this is, obviously something has changed between their dynamic over the past 18 months or however long. But through these exchanges, you can really see why they had such a strong following. I mean, obviously, you and I have listened to the show a lot more than maybe people would have before this whole thing blew up. But the signs were clearly there. And it really is its own drama show in itself. Like, it's these storylines. It's, this person's storming off, Carl's off sick again, what's happening there? I mean, it's like a season of Maths, but it's just doing it live every day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the crossover between entertainment and real life continues. It is a form of reality show we're watching here and listening to. When's it listed for hearing in the federal court, Calum? Do we have a date yet?
The hearings are, we've actually got, I think, both cases set to be heard on the same day later this month, Friday the 24th of April. So something nice leading into that Anzac Day long weekend for everyone to look forward to.
Well, I know where you'll be, Calum. You'll be front row in federal court. Thank you for doing that. Calum Jaspan there, the media writer for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. You can read his story right now on theage.com.au or smh.com.au. Thanks, Calum.
See you next time.